Nerds, what is up? Welcome back. It is so good to see you again. Thank you so much for being here. Today, I want to talk to you about something called the Orton Effect. This is a very simple thing to do in Photoshop. If you haven't heard of it, I pretty much guarantee you've seen a photo with this effect applied. You've probably liked it. It's very popular right now. For those of you who aren't familiar, the Orton Effect simply applies a little bit of a dreamy glow to photos. It's kind of like the halation on a diffusion filter, if you're familiar with that from videography. It basically just makes the highlights bloom a little bit. They glow a tiny bit. It's sort of like Rivendell from Lord of the Rings. It has that dreamy landscape look. It's really beautiful. It's super easy. Let's get into it. Now, we're going to start in Lightroom, but this is not an effect that you do in Lightroom. There's ways to sort of imitate it in Lightroom, and there's some good videos that show you how to do that, but in my opinion, they don't look quite right. The best way is in Photoshop. There's only 3 steps. So I have this photo. These are some cypress trees in Louisiana. I just shot this a couple days ago. I've already applied some edits, some very basic, straightforward stuff, nothing crazy fancy. I'm going to open it up in Photoshop. I hit Command E, Control E if you're on Windows. Now the file is open in Photoshop. You can see that the image itself, marked as background, is locked. That's fine, we can leave that layer locked. We're actually not going to touch that at all. I'm going to drag it down to duplicate layer. Once it's duplicated, we're going to click Filter, Blur, and then Gaussian Blur. So you can see that that just blurs the whole image out. Now Gaussian Blur, there's of course a slider here. You can go from 1/10 of a pixel all the way up to 1,000 pixels. Which obviously looks kind of silly. I generally find between 35 and 40 looks good. Too high looks a little ridiculous. Too low, you're not even going to see any effect. So I'm going to stick right around 40. I think that looks good from my past experience. Obviously this, once I click OK, this is very intense here, but we're not going to leave it like that. That was just step 1. Step 2, click on Image and go to Adjustments, and then Levels. Now here, we're going to take these 2 on the end, and we're going to drag them towards the middle. Now, it looked kind of silly before. It looks even more silly now. But I will say, in general, about 70 and 170, I've found looks great. You can play around with that. Different images will require different quantities of this levels adjustment, but that's a great starting point. So I click OK. Now we have a nightmare from the deep. It looks horrible, but we're not done. That was step 2. Step 3, opacity. We're going to take this, I slide it all the way back to 0 because I want my eyes to adjust to the real image. It looks so intense right off the bat there. So I'm going to take opacity. Now that it's been at 0, I'm going to slide it back up. And again, this is one of those taste things where you're going to have to find what looks good for you. I love it right around like 8 to 10. So that looks really subtle, but if we click it on and off, you can see a delicate amount of glow. Now this image is a little more subtle with the highlights, so you're not seeing as much. So let's go up, let's take it to like 15 so you can really get a feel for it. Now when I toggle this on and off, you can see it actually really adds a lot. There's a little more contrast, a little more richness to the colors, and there's sort of an ethereal glow to it that took this from just a photo of some trees to kind of having that Rivendell look, right? I think 16 is a little high. I might keep this one around 12. Feel free to go up to like 30 to see what it looks like. I don't personally like that. I think that's far too heavy-handed, but this is art. Part of being an artist is discovering your own personal style. So I always encourage every slider you touch, crank it up and crank it back down and kind of find what resonates with you, what feels good, what looks good, what makes you happy. That is for the global Orton effect. Now there's some images with a subject, say an animal or a person, where you don't want a global Orton effect. You want to glow the background, but keep the subject nice and sharp. And so there's a way to apply this locally to only parts of the image that you want, and I'm going to show you that next. But first, I did want to take a quick moment to say thank you to the sponsor for today's video, PPA, or the Professional Photographers of America. Now that name sounds very intimidating, I know, but it's actually an amazing membership for everybody who likes photography, whether you are a seasoned professional of decades or a brand new hobbyist just getting into it. The membership is only $30 a month, and it comes with a ton of really helpful educational materials just like this video. There's over 900 videos on their website. Perhaps most importantly, if you're like me, is the PPA membership comes with $15,000 of gear insurance. You might remember that I have launched a camera into space and lost it forever. I've also accidentally dunked a camera into the Antarctic Ocean. So if you're like me, that insurance is a huge peace of mind while you're traveling. It really sucks to break a camera and have to pay to get it replaced. The insurance is so cool. And the best part of all is that once a year, PPA puts on an event called Imaging USA. It's a huge conference. You'll meet 1,000 other incredible photographers. There's industry reps from different brands. It's such a cool place. You get super inspired. I, as you might guess from a name like NateintheWild, kind of like to be alone. I like to hike into the woods, and the fewer people I see, the better. But Imaging USA is unbelievably fun. You meet other photographers, you get inspired, you get to take photos of people and with people, which I don't usually like, but I love this. It is extremely cool. I hope to see you there. PPA, they're awesome. Check it out. So now we are back into the localized Orton effect. I've already done the Lightroom edits on this. I open it up in Photoshop, same procedure as before. You can also take a JPEG that you've already edited and exported and put that into Photoshop. It does not have to come directly from your Lightroom catalog. This is a photo of a fox. I love it. It's very dreamy right off the bat. I shot it with the 400mm f2.8 from Sony, so it's got this nice creamy bokeh, to quote Sam Newton, really creamy background. It's got kind of an ethereal look. I want to kick that up a notch. So let's go through the Orton effect. Again, we just duplicate, filter, go to the Gaussian blur. I'm going to leave it at about 40. Image, adjustments, levels. We're going to do the same, the 70, 170. I'm actually going to bring this down to more like 160. Let's get those highlights a little more punchy, right? And then we'll just bring this back to like 10%. Just, you know, checking all the boxes, doing it straightforward, nothing fancy there. Toggle it on and off. You can see it really lends a nice dreamy look to this. I think that looks really good on this image, but if we zoom in a little bit, we're losing a little bit of sharpness on the fox, and not in a way that I necessarily love. So I'm going to remove it. There's two ways you can do it. The easiest is, because this is its own layer, you can just erase it from the fox. Boom, it's done. It's that easy. I have my opacity on this eraser at 25%. I have my hardness at 0%. I would always keep your hardness at 0%. I will show you why. So I'm going to click this. I'm going to take this all the way up. Let's go to 58%, which I know looks heinous, but if your hardness is at 100% and you start erasing, you can actually see the circle. That looks so silly. So I always will keep it at 0% hardness. Again, if your opacity is at 100%, every single brush stroke removes the entirety of the Orton. So that's a little bit heavy-handed. So I just keep everything right around, you know, no hardness, about 25% opacity. And then you can go in and you can clean up a little bit of the Orton from the subject itself, right off the face there. I want the eye sharp. I want the hair around the eye sharp. I kind of like the Orton effect down here. I like the dreaminess up here, but I want the ears and the eyes and the snout to stay sharp. And because I had 0% hardness and just a little bit of opacity, I'm able to clean that up. We still get a nice Orton effect when I toggle that on and off. There's a nice clean Orton effect everywhere in the image except for the face, which keeps the subject looking sharp. I love that. Now there's one other option which I think is pretty cool. So I'm going to get rid of that. We're going to start fresh. So there's the full-on Orton effect. I'm going to bring it back up to 100%. It looks kind of ridiculous. So instead of doing a global one and removing it from the areas you don't want it, you can also paint it into the areas you do want it. So we take this Orton Effect layer, set it to opacity 100, and then we're going to go down here and we're going to click on layer masks. We're going to make a layer mask, and then I'm going to hit Command I or Control I to invert it. So if you're not familiar with layer masks, this little rectangle down here, you might have noticed was white before, and I hit Command I and it turns black. So with layer masks, black is hidden, white is visible. So the black layer mask is hidden, and then this little box over here, the white being on top means that I'm going to reveal the layer mask when I brush. So I'm going to click on my brush. Now you'll see I have opacity 100, flow 100, and hardness 100. If I brush this on now, it sure looks terrible. You don't want that. So Command Z, let's get rid of that. Obviously, hardness to 0, just like I was saying before. Now that solves only a little bit of the problem. It softens up those edges. Obviously, that still is ridiculous. So I'm gonna bring the flow down to like 5%. So now, let's zoom in a little so we can see it more. When you brush that in, see how it added just a little bit of Orton Effect there? All right, so with that flow at a very low level, like 5%, I'm going to come in and I'm going to just brush around the parts of the image where we want a little effect. I want the dreaminess around these edges, but I don't want any on the face. Now, if you look down here, you can see we have this sort of mix, right? It's not a hard line. It's thicker in some areas and thinner in others, namely over his face. And I like that. We can add even a tiny bit over the face if we want some, but then we can make it thicker over this part of his body. So there's some more glow in the areas where we want it. And I'm just kind of clicking once or twice. If you're not familiar with how the brush tool works, the more passes over an area, the more dramatic the effect will get. So if I just sit here and I wiggle my brush back and forth, it just goes thicker and thicker and thicker until that basically has 100% of the Orton Effect. So you have to be gentle and thoughtful about where you're brushing in, but this is, in my opinion, an even better option than doing the global effect and erasing a section. It's nice to choose specifically where it is and the level to which you have it. So you can brush in everywhere and get the image exactly as dreamy as you want. And now when we toggle it on and off, you can see the Orton Effect is very heavy around some of the sides, but we still have that sharpness on the fox's face. You can see the hairs, you can see his eyes, you can see the nose. And to me, that's a great way to implement this. And just really quick, I guess, to clarify part of why I like to keep it off of the face, eyeballs specifically start to look super dead with the Orton Effect, right? Like, to me, that's not, you lose a lot of what makes the image beautiful. You know, with wildlife, you want the eyes. So I put that thick Orton Effect on there. Look at the way they just glaze over. It's not good. You lose that sparkle, you lose the depth. It kind of makes them look like a mannequin. So for me, I never want Orton Effect over the animal's face. And that's the Orton Effect. That's all there is to it. It's just those 3 steps to apply it. Gaussian blur, image adjustments, and then opacity. It's that simple. You can brush it in, you can erase some of it out, you can leave it global. It's that easy. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Again, my name is NateintheWild. If you liked it, if you learned something, click like, click subscribe, write to your congressman, and please always wash your hands before eating. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time.